Okay, so you want to DM your first session, but you got no idea where to begin. The first tip I'd like to start with is don't overplan. When you overplan, you're setting yourself up for failure. I see new dungeon masters all the time prepping way too much, planning every single line of dialogue for every single circumstance, for every NPC, and it's a lot. It's too much. It's too much work going into it. The session won't feel flexible, and it will kind of have this railroady vibe. If you don't know what railroading is, we're going to get into that later in this video. So the reason why you don't want to overplan is because your players will feel it in the session. They will feel you staring at your computer screen, reading lines of dialogue, or scrolling through to figure out which part of this chapter we're in. It's going to feel more like you're reading your players a book rather than collaborating and telling a story. I've played D&D for about 15 years now, and from my experience, the best sessions come from improv, the sessions where I underprepared and have to kind of make it up as I go. Obviously, improvisation is not a skill you're just born with. It's something you have to work on and train yourself, which is why I would argue improvisation is the number one skill a dungeon master can have. It's something that you learn with time as you play more D&D, and it's saved my butt tons of times, right? And that brings me to tip number 2, which is have confidence. Because if you're going to be improvising and you're unsure about what you are going to be making up on the fly, the players are going to feel that. They're going to feel your uncertainty. If you're not leaning into the voices of the characters and the reality of it all, the players won't be able to fall into their own characters, and that can create an uncomfortable atmosphere at the table. The second thing it can lead to is players who push your boundaries. The second they find out the rules of your world aren't concrete and that you won't stand on business, they'll take advantage of that, and they will find a way to bend the rules to their favor. Hopefully your players aren't like that, but I guess that brings us to tip number 3, which is make sure you have good players. The players at a table will 100% dictate the fun at the table. If you are uncomfortable with who you're playing with, if you haven't had a session 0, which by the way, session 0 is when you meet up with all of your players before playing and you just go over the ground rules, the expectations for the campaign, you make your characters. In that session 0, if the vibes are way off, don't plan on having a year-long campaign with these players. This is a huge commitment, DMing for a group, and you want to make sure it's a group that you're comfortable with and that you feel like you can have fun with at the table. That brings us to tip number 4, which is don't railroad. You know that word I mentioned earlier in this video? Bringing that back. Railroading is when every single beat, story beat in the session, it has been planned out. No matter what the players do, they are going to be railroaded or heavily guided down a certain path that was essentially pre-decided by the dungeon master. So if the players really wanted to do plan B, but you only had plan A planned, and so you lasso them onto plan A, that's problematic. That's railroading. Players need agency in order to have fun. That's the whole point of it being a role-playing game, is the players are essentially telling a collaborative story. You're not telling the story as a dungeon master, you're just giving the players opportunities to tell their story. That doesn't mean that certain story beats can't be planned out. In fact, I highly recommend that you do plan out story beats. My session prep kind of looks like a set of bullet points, each bullet point being a broad idea of what might be happening in the session. For example, group arrives at Phandelver. They investigate the cave. Monster A, B, and C attacks them while they are in the cave. That's all I really need to have a general structure for my session. And if the players choose not to enter the cave, guess what? They're not entering the cave. Don't force them down that road. I played a session once as a player where the DM had pre-decided where all the items are, the objectives, the NPCs in this massive sprawling town. And guess what? My party walked around aimlessly trying to find any kind of plot hook, any kind of quest line, anything that we could just do. And we had nothing to do because the dungeon master planted their foot down and said, no, you have to find where this NPC is because that's where the NPC is. Instead, let's say you had a guard, a city guard who had a quest line for your players, a pivotal quest line, but he happened to be at the tavern. Well, if the players don't go to the tavern, don't put him in the tavern. Put him somewhere else, somewhere where the players are actually going to stumble across the city guard. Now, you might be asking, Cameron, isn't that railroading? Railroading would be the city guard speaks to the players choose not to do the quest line, and you force them to do the quest line anyways. Which brings me to my fifth and final tip, which is understand your role as the Dungeon Master. Your job isn't to ensure the party has fun, okay? That should be a collaborative effort. That's not on you. Your job is to create a set of boundaries or rules or confines that this world lives in. So what you are doing as the Dungeon Master is you are creating a series of DCs or difficulty checks for the players. So if the players want to try to jump over a canyon gap, you're asking them to roll an athletics check, and in the back of your mind you're saying that's going to be a DC 25. If they don't roll a 25 or higher, they are falling down that canyon. And then your job as the DM is to decide, okay, how much damage do they take if they fall down that canyon? Okay, they take 42 damage. What monster is at the bottom of that canyon? If it's not a monster, do they find a relic, a plot hook, something else to investigate? You are giving your players opportunities to express their characters and their skill sets, and that is fun for the players. When you view your job as the Dungeon Master as simply that, creating boundaries for your world and opportunities for your players, that's really all it is. And you can ensure that your world feels alive by working on that improv. You know, practice NPC voices in the shower and fall in love with your world. The improv will come naturally. You will naturally know what each character sounds like. If you have any questions about being a Dungeon Master, I have lots of experience. I will answer every single question in the comments. Just write the question below and I will be there to respond. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and have fun playing D&D.